London, 1847. The silver-grey mist clung to the cobblestone streets as Lady Isabella Montgomery gazed out the window of her father's modest townhouse. Her slender fingers traced the droplets of rain sliding down the glass, much like the tears she refused to shed. The weather matched her mood, somber yet dignified, as she contemplated the decision that had been made for her future. "Hey, Isabella, are you listening to me?" The Earl of Westmoreland's voice, once commanding and confident, now carried the desperate edge of a man facing ruin. She turned from the window, her emerald eyes meeting her father's weathered face. "Yes, father. The Duke of Blackthorn has agreed to the arrangement. This is not merely an arrangement, child. It is our salvation." The Earl's hands trembled slightly as he clutched a letter bearing the Blackthorn seal. "The Duke's solicitor has confirmed the terms. Your dowry will be modest, but in return the Duke will settle our debts and restore our family's standing." Isabella smoothed the folds of her deep blue dress, a relic from a time when their finances were less precarious. "And what does the Duke receive in this bargain, father? A wife he has never met? A stranger to raise his children? He gains a respectable match from an old family. Your reputation is impeccable, your education superior to most young ladies, and—" He hesitated. "He requires a mother for his daughters." "I've heard whispers about the Duke," Isabella said, her voice measured. "They say he is as cold as the winter frost, that his heart turned to stone when his wife passed." The Earl sighed, the weight of their circumstances evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Rumors often exaggerate, Isabella. Duke Blackthorn is a powerful man, respected in Parliament and feared in business circles. His first marriage was tragically brief, yes, but he has conducted himself with honor." Isabella's lady's maid, Martha, entered quietly with a tea tray, her eyes downcast but ears attentive. "When am I to meet my future husband?" Isabella asked, accepting a cup of tea from Martha with a grateful nod. "There will be no courtship, I'm afraid. The Duke is a busy man and sees no need for such formalities. The wedding is set for 3 weeks hence at St. George's." The teacup trembled in Isabella's hand. "So soon, without even a proper introduction?" "His Grace will attend Lady Harrington's ball tomorrow evening. You will have your introduction there." The Earl's tone softened as he regarded his only child. "Isabella, I would not ask this of you if there were any other way. Your mother, rest her soul, would be heartbroken to see our family name dragged through scandal and bankruptcy." Isabella set down her cup with deliberate care. "I understand my duty, father. I have always understood it." She lifted her chin, her posture straight and proud, despite the weight settling on her shoulders. "I shall meet the Duke tomorrow and prepare to become his wife, for our family's honor." Later that evening, Isabella sat at her dressing table as Martha brushed her chestnut hair in long, soothing strokes. The maid's face in the mirror reflected concern for her mistress. "Is it true what they say, Martha?" Isabella asked quietly, "about Blackthorn Manor being a place of shadows and sorrow?" Martha's hands stilled momentarily. "I've a cousin who works in the village near the Duke's estate. She says his Grace has changed since the death of his first wife. He was once considered a kind master, even charming in society. Now he speaks little, smiles never, and devotes himself entirely to his business affairs and parliamentary duties." "And his daughters, what of them?" "2 little girls, my lady. Lady Charlotte, who is 7, and Lady Emma, just 5. Quiet children, from what I hear, kept mostly in the nursery under the care of their governess." Isabella's gaze drifted to the portrait of her mother on her bedside table. "Children who have lost their mother deserve tenderness and understanding. Perhaps that, at least, I can provide." "You've always had a way with children, my lady," Martha said softly. "Remember how you used to gather the tenant farmers' children for story hour when we visited your father's country estate?" A ghost of a smile crossed Isabella's face. "Yes, before we had to sell it." She squared her shoulders. "I may not have chosen this path, Martha, but I shall walk it with dignity. Duke Blackthorn may have bargained for a convenient wife, but he shall find I am not a woman easily dismissed." The following evening, Lady Harrington's ballroom blazed with candlelight, the glittering chandeliers casting a warm glow over the assembled aristocracy of London. Isabella entered on her father's arm, her gown a masterpiece of ivory silk, with delicate emerald embroidery that matched her eyes, the last creation commissioned from a French modiste before their finances collapsed. Whispers followed her progress across the room. The Earl's daughter, To marry Blackthorn. Poor girl. Such a cold man, tragic about his first wife. Isabella kept her head high, though her heart fluttered with apprehension. Then the crowd seemed to part, conversations faltering, as a tall figure entered the ballroom. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn," announced the butler. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The Duke stood framed in the doorway, his powerful presence commanding attention without effort. Tall and broad-shouldered, he cut an imposing figure in his perfectly tailored black evening clothes. His features were striking rather than handsome. A strong jaw, aristocratic nose, and penetrating grey eyes beneath dark brows. His hair, black as midnight with threads of silver at the temples, was swept back from a high forehead. But it was his expression that truly captured Isabella's attention, or rather, the lack of one. His face might have been carved from marble, revealing nothing of the man beneath. The Earl guided Isabella forward as the Duke approached. "Your Grace, may I present my daughter, Lady Isabella Montgomery." Isabella sank into a perfect curtsy, years of deportment lessons serving her well despite her nerves. "Your Grace, it is an honor." When she rose, she found those grey eyes studying her with detached assessment, as if she were a horse at auction. "Lady Isabella." His voice was deep and cultured, but devoid of warmth. He took her gloved hand and bowed over it with impeccable manners that nonetheless felt mechanical. "I trust your father has informed you of our arrangement." "He has, Your Grace." "Good. I dislike unnecessary conversation." His gaze swept over her once more. "You appear healthy and well-educated. My solicitor speaks highly of your character and accomplishments. You will suit my requirements." Isabella felt a flicker of indignation beneath her composure. "And what requirements might those be, Your Grace, beyond settling my father's debts?" Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she would speak so directly. "My daughters need appropriate guidance as they grow. My household requires a mistress to maintain proper order. Society expects a man of my position to have a wife. You fulfill these necessities without complications of excessive emotion or romantic notions." "I see," Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the coldness of his assessment. "A business arrangement, then?" "Precisely." He offered his arm. "The first dance is beginning. We shall participate, as expected." As he led her to the dance floor, Isabella gathered her courage. "Might I inquire about your daughters, Your Grace? I would like to know something of the children who will be in my care." For a moment the mask slipped, and Isabella glimpsed a shadow of profound pain in his eyes before the shutters fell once more. "Charlotte resembles her mother. Emma has my colouring. They are well behaved and keep to their schedules. Their governess, Miss Winters, will provide you with their routines. I do not interfere with the nursery, and I expect you will manage that domain without troubling me." The orchestra began a waltz, and the Duke's hand settled at her waist, maintaining a proper distance as they moved with practiced precision across the floor. His steps were perfect, his lead confident. Yet Isabella felt no connection to the man who would soon be her husband. "Do you ever spend time with your daughters, Your Grace?" she dared to ask. His jaw tightened. "They are presented to me after dinner on Sundays, unless I am away on business. This arrangement has served adequately since their mother's passing." Isabella's heart ached at the coldness of it. "Children need more than adequacy, Your Grace. They need affection, guidance." "What they need," he interrupted, his voice low and cutting, "is stability and proper upbringing. Sentimentality is a luxury I neither indulge in nor encourage. Remember that, Lady Isabella, when you come to Blackthorn Manor." As they continued to dance in silence, Isabella studied the man who would become her husband. Behind that impassive facade, and beneath those harsh words, she sensed not cruelty, but something far more complex, a pain so deep it had transformed into a fortress. The music drew to a close, and the Duke escorted her back to her father with a formal bow. "The wedding preparations proceed as planned. My solicitor will call upon the Earl tomorrow with the final contracts." He turned to Isabella. "I depart for Blackthorn Manor in the morning, and shall return only for the ceremony. Good evening, Lady Isabella." With that he strode away, leaving Isabella to contemplate the life that awaited her, with a man who seemed determined to keep his heart locked away from the world, and from the wife who would soon share his name, but perhaps never his soul. 3 weeks later, beneath the soaring arches of St. George's, Hanover Square, Isabella stood beside the Duke as they exchanged vows. His responses were clear and precise, hers steady despite her uncertainty. When the moment came for him to kiss his bride, he placed a brief, formal kiss upon her lips that held not a hint of affection. As they turned to face the sparse gathering of witnesses, the Duke leaned close to her ear and whispered words that froze her heart. "My heart died with the mother of my daughters. Remember that, Duchess, and expect nothing more than what we have agreed upon." Isabella felt the weight of the blackthorn signet ring on her finger as she walked down the aisle on her new husband's arm. Behind her practiced smile lay a silent promise to herself. This cold, wounded man might have secured her hand in marriage, but she would not allow his bitterness to define her future or that of the two little girls waiting at Blackthorn Manor. The carriage rattled over the winding country road, carrying Isabella away from everything familiar. Seated across from her, the Duke remained silent, his attention fixed on documents from a leather portfolio. He had spoken barely 20 words since leaving London, making it abundantly clear that conversation was not among his priorities. As twilight descended, Blackthorn Manor finally came into view through a break in the ancient oaks lining the drive. Isabella leaned forward, her breath catching at the sight. Rising against the darkening sky stood a grand Tudor mansion, its stone facade weathered by centuries, wings stretching outward like great arms embracing the formal gardens. Lights glowed in scattered windows, yet something in its aspect suggested more shadows than warmth. "We have arrived," the Duke stated unnecessarily as the carriage slowed. Isabella gathered her composure. "It's magnificent. It has stood for 400 years. A hint of pride colored his voice, the first emotion she'd detected since their meeting. The East Wing dates to Henry VIII's reign. Subsequent generations added the rest. The carriage halted before the main entrance, where a double row of servants stood waiting. As they descended, an elderly man in impeccable livery stepped forward. "Welcome home, Your Grace, and welcome to Blackthorn Manor, Your Grace," he said, bowing deeply to Isabella. "Thank you." Isabella faltered, realizing she did not know the man's name. "Hawkins, Your Grace. I have served as butler at Blackthorn Manor for 32 years. His formal demeanor softened slightly. "We are all most pleased to welcome a new Duchess." The Duke cut in before Isabella could respond. "Has Miss Winters brought the children down as instructed?" "Yes, Your Grace. They await in the blue drawing room." Isabella's heart quickened at the prospect of meeting her stepdaughters. The Duke offered his arm with mechanical courtesy, leading her through the grand entrance hall with its soaring ceiling and ancestral portraits watching from the walls. Hawkins opened a set of double doors, announcing, "His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn, and Her Grace, the Duchess." Two small figures stood side by side near the fireplace, backs straight and faces solemn. Behind them waited a thin woman with greying hair pulled severely back, whom Isabella presumed to be Miss Winters, the governess. Isabella's gaze fixed on the children. The elder, Charlotte, had delicate features framed by golden curls, while little Emma's dark hair and grey eyes marked her unmistakably as her father's daughter. Both wore identical blue dresses with white pinafores, their expressions carefully neutral, yet Isabella detected a flicker of curiosity in their eyes. The Duke cleared his throat. "Charlotte, Emma, this is Lady Isabella Montgomery, now the Duchess of Blackthorn. She will be mistress of this house and responsible for your upbringing." Isabella stepped forward, ignoring protocol to kneel before the children, bringing herself to their eye level. "I am so pleased to meet you both," she said warmly. "I hope we shall become good friends." Charlotte, the 7-year-old, executed a perfect curtsy. "Welcome to Blackthorn Manor, Your Grace." Her voice was clear but hesitant, as if reciting a carefully memorized greeting. 5-year-old Emma followed her sister's example, though her curtsy wobbled slightly. "Welcome, Your Grace," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Isabella smiled gently. "Perhaps when we are alone you might call me Isabella. Your Grace seems rather formal between family, does it not?" Before either child could respond, Miss Winters stepped forward with a disapproving frown. "The young ladies have been taught proper address for all occasions, Your Grace. Familiarity can breed carelessness in manners." Isabella rose, keeping her expression pleasant despite the rebuke. "Of course, Miss Winters. I would never wish to undermine your excellent guidance. However, I believe there is a time for formality and a time for family warmth." The Duke watched this exchange with impassive features. The children should retire now. They have been kept from their routine long enough. Might I accompany them to the nursery? Isabella asked. I would like to see them settled. A look of surprise crossed the children's faces, quickly masked as they glanced at their father. That will not be necessary, the Duke replied. Miss Winters manages the evening routine efficiently. Isabella persisted gently. Even so, I would value the opportunity to become familiar with their quarters and routine, unless there is some objection. For a moment the Duke seemed about to refuse, but instead gave a curt nod. As you wish. Hawkins will show you to your chambers when you are ready. I have correspondence to attend to. He turned to leave, then paused. Charlotte, Emma, conduct yourselves properly for your new stepmother. After he departed, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Isabella smiled at the children, determined to bridge the awkwardness. Shall we proceed to the nursery then? Perhaps you might show me the way. Charlotte looked uncertainly at Miss Winters, who nodded stiffly. The young ladies may lead you, Your Grace. I shall follow to ensure they do not overtire themselves with excessive chatter. As they climbed the grand staircase, Isabella attempted gentle conversation. Do you enjoy reading, Charlotte? I brought several books that I loved as a child. Miss Winters selects our reading materials, Charlotte replied cautiously. We read improving texts and practice our penmanship daily. And you, Emma, do you have a favorite story? The younger girl glanced back at the governess before whispering, I like the one about the little duck. Miss Winters interjected, Lady Emma refers to a moral tale about obedience and the consequences of wandering from one's proper place. It serves as an excellent lesson. Isabella contained a sigh, beginning to understand the rigid atmosphere that surrounded these children. The nursery suite, when they reached it, reinforced her impressions. The rooms were immaculate, with educational charts adorning the walls and not a toy out of place. While comfortable and well-appointed, it lacked the warmth and small touches of disorder that should accompany childhood. After watching the girls change into nightgowns with the help of a nursery maid, Isabella asked if she might read them a bedtime story. The young ladies have a strict schedule, Your Grace, Miss Winters objected. They retire precisely at 7 o'clock after prayers and a review of tomorrow's lessons. Isabella noticed Emma's crestfallen expression and made a decision. I appreciate your dedication to routine, Miss Winters, but tonight is special. As their new mother, I would like this privilege. Her tone was gentle but firm. Perhaps we might bend the rules just this once. The governess's lips thinned with disapproval, but she could hardly refuse the new duchess outright. As you wish, Your Grace. I shall use the time to prepare tomorrow's scripture lesson. When Miss Winters withdrew to an adjoining room, Isabella sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed, gesturing for Emma to join them. Both girls seemed hesitant, unaccustomed to such informality. Now then, Isabella said softly, shall I tell you a story my mother once told me? It was my favorite when I was just your age, Emma. As Isabella wove a tale of a brave princess who rescued her kingdom through kindness and cleverness rather than force, she watched the children's expressions gradually relax. Emma's eyes widened with wonder, while Charlotte, though maintaining her composure, leaned forward slightly in interest. When the story concluded, Emma looked up at Isabella with the first genuine smile she had shown. I like that story better than the duck one. So do I, Isabella confided, tucking the blankets around her. Perhaps tomorrow we might read another. Charlotte, more cautious than her sister, asked, will you be managing our lessons now, Your Grace? I imagine Miss Winters will continue your formal education, Isabella replied carefully. But I hope to spend time with you both each day. Would you like that? Charlotte glanced toward the door where Miss Winters had disappeared. Father says we must not be a burden to anyone. The simple statement revealed volumes about the Duke's household. Isabella gently touched Charlotte's cheek. You could never be a burden, dear one. Getting to know you both will be my greatest joy. After bidding the girls good night, Isabella found Hawkins waiting to escort her to her chambers. As they walked the long corridor, she gathered her courage to ask, Hawkins, how long has Miss Winters been with the children? Since shortly after the late Duchess's passing, Your Grace. Nearly 4 years now. And before that? What was the household like when the first Duchess was alive? Hawkins hesitated, his professional demeanor momentarily troubled. It would not be my place to discuss such matters, Your Grace. I understand your discretion, Hawkins, But I am now the Duchess of Blackthorn. To serve this family properly, I need to understand its past. The old butler's resolve wavered. The late Duchess, Lady Catherine, brought much light to these halls. Music, laughter, guests. Blackthorn Manor was different then. And the Duke, was he different as well? Hawkins stopped before an ornate door. Your chambers, Your Grace. After a pause, he added quietly, His Grace suffered a profound change after the tragedy. What you see now is not the man he once was. With a respectful bow, he left her at the threshold. Isabella entered a suite of rooms decorated in shades of blue and gold, elegantly appointed but somehow impersonal. A young maid curtsied nervously, introducing herself as Lily, assigned to be Isabella's lady's maid. As Lily helped her change, Isabella learned the Duke occupied separate chambers in the opposite wing. Later, as she sat at the dressing table brushing out her hair, a soft knock sounded at the door. Opening it, she found little Emma in her nightgown, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Emma, is something the matter? Isabella ushered the child inside. Mr. Whiskers wanted to say good night again, Emma said, holding up the rabbit. Then in a smaller voice, and I wanted to ask if you really will tell another story tomorrow. Isabella's heart melted at this tentative reach for connection. Of course I will. I promise. She knelt down, gently straightening Emma's nightgown. Does Miss Winters know you're here? Emma shook her head, eyes widening in alarm. She checks on us at 8:30. I must be back before then. Then we should get you back to the nursery quickly, Isabella said, taking the child's hand. Though I'm very glad you came to visit me. As they slipped through the shadowed corridors, Emma whispered, Charlotte wanted to come too, but she said it wasn't proper. Perhaps tomorrow Charlotte might join us for our story, Isabella suggested. Returning Emma to her bed without alerting Miss Winters, Isabella pressed a gentle kiss to the child's forehead, an impulse that made Emma's eyes widen in surprise before a smile bloomed across her face. Back in her chambers, Isabella stood at the window, gazing out at the moonlit grounds of Blackthorn Manor. Somewhere in this grand, sombre house was her husband, a man who had married her, yet remained a stranger. And in the nursery were 2 children, starved for affection, trapped in routines that provided structure but little joy. This house needs light, she whispered to herself, determination settling in her heart, and those children need love. The Duke might have declared his heart dead, but Isabella Montgomery, now Duchess of Blackthorn, was very much alive, and she would not surrender to the shadows that had claimed this household for too long. Weeks passed at Blackthorn Manor as autumn deepened toward winter. Isabella established herself with quiet determination, learning the rhythms of the household while gradually introducing changes. The Duke remained distant, their interactions limited to occasional formal dinners, where conversation rarely strayed beyond estate matters or perfunctory social obligations. Each morning, Isabella visited the nursery, slowly earning Charlotte's guarded trust and nurturing Emma's growing attachment. Miss Winters resisted these intrusions into her domain with rigid disapproval, but Isabella persisted with unfailing politeness and increasingly firm authority. One crisp November afternoon, Isabella sat in the morning room reviewing household accounts when Hawkins appeared at the door. Mr. Hughes awaits in the library, Your Grace. He has brought the quarterly reports for the estate and the London properties. Isabella had yet to meet Hughes, her husband's steward and closest adviser. Thank you, Hawkins. Please inform Mr. Hughes I shall join him shortly. In the library she found a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes and a practical demeanour. He bowed respectfully. Your Grace, I apologize if I've interrupted your day. I normally conduct business directly with the Duke. My husband is in London until tomorrow, Isabella replied, seating herself at the desk. I would be happy to review the reports in his absence. Hughes hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. With all due respect, Your Grace, these matters are quite complex. His Grace prefers to handle all financial and business concerns personally. Isabella maintained her composure. I understand, Mr. Hughes. However, as Duchess of Blackthorn, I should be familiar with the estate's operations. I assure you I am quite capable of comprehending complex matters. Something in her tone must have convinced him, for Hughes reluctantly opened his portfolio. As you wish, Your Grace. For the next hour, Isabella demonstrated her unexpected aptitude for business affairs, asking pointed questions that revealed her intelligence and quick grasp of the estate's extensive holdings. Hughes gradually shifted from condescension to reluctant respect. The coal mine near Sheffield, Isabella noted. The production has decreased while maintenance costs have risen substantially, yet there's no explanation provided. Hughes looked surprised at her observation. A situation His Grace is monitoring. There have been concerns about unsafe conditions raised by the workers. Which His Grace is addressing, I presume, Isabella pressed. The Duke believes the complaints are exaggerated. The mine remains profitable despite the decline. Isabella made a note. I should like a more detailed report on this particular property, Mr. Hughes. Safety concerns should never be subordinated to profit. Their discussion was interrupted by the library door bursting open as Emma ran in, tears streaming down her face, followed by a flustered Charlotte. I told her we shouldn't disturb you, Charlotte said anxiously, but she wouldn't listen. Isabella immediately rose, concern replacing her business demeanor. What's happened, Emma? The little girl threw herself into Isabella's arms, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Miss Winters took it away, she sobbed. She said it was inappropriate and childish. Took what away, darling? Isabella soothed, stroking Emma's dark hair. Mr. Whiskers, Charlotte explained quietly. Her rabbit. Miss Winters found it during inspection and said Emma is too old for such attachments. Isabella's expression hardened, even as her voice remained gentle. Mr. Hughes, please excuse me. This requires my immediate attention. Hughes gathered his papers, looking uncomfortable but not unsympathetic. Of course, Your Grace. I shall return tomorrow when His Grace is present. Isabella found Miss Winters in the schoolroom, methodically sorting through a cupboard. On a high shelf sat Emma's beloved stuffed rabbit. Miss Winters, a word, if you please, Isabella said, her voice controlled despite her anger. The governess turned, her face a mask of righteous authority. Your Grace, I was just explaining to the young ladies that proper young women do not form inappropriate attachments to toys. Lady Emma must learn to conduct herself with decorum. Emma is 5 years old, Isabella countered. There is nothing improper about a child treasuring a comfort object. With respect, Your Grace, the late Duke's mother established strict guidelines for raising Blackthorn children. Indulgence leads to weakness of character. Isabella stepped closer, lowering her voice. I am aware of tradition, Miss Winters, but I am now responsible for these children's well-being. Emma will have her rabbit returned immediately. His Grace entrusted me with his daughters when he made me their stepmother, Isabella interrupted firmly. Unless you wish to take this matter to him directly, I suggest you defer to my judgment. The threat of involving the Duke, who detested domestic disturbances, was effective. With rigid disapproval, Miss Winters retrieved the rabbit and handed it to Isabella. Thank you, Isabella said with perfect courtesy. Now I believe the children might benefit from an afternoon in the gardens before the weather turns. I shall accompany them myself. That evening, Isabella sat at her writing desk, penning a letter, when a knock sounded at her door. Opening it, she found herself face to face with her husband, returned early from London. Your Grace, she said, surprised, we did not expect you until tomorrow. Evidently, he replied, his expression unreadable. May I enter? Isabella stepped aside, suddenly aware she was dressed in her nightgown and robe. The Duke rarely sought her out, and never in her private chambers. He remained standing, formal, despite the hour. I understand there was an incident with Miss Winters today. Isabella straightened, prepared to defend her actions. There was a disagreement regarding Emma's comfort toy. I felt Miss Winters's approach was unnecessarily severe. Miss Winters has threatened to resign her position. She feels her authority has been undermined. I see. Isabella met his gaze steadily. Would you prefer I had not intervened when Emma was in tears? I prefer order in my household, he said coldly. The children have a structured routine that has served them well. Your interference creates confusion. Isabella felt her temper rise. With respect, Your Grace, a routine that leaves a child sobbing over a beloved toy is not serving anyone well. Your daughters need warmth and understanding, not just rules and schedules. You have been their stepmother for barely 6 weeks. Miss Winters has guided them for 4 years. And in those 4 years, have you seen them laugh freely? Have they run to you with their small joys and sorrows? Do they know they are loved unconditionally? Isabella challenged. The Duke's jaw tightened. Sentimentality is not a luxury I provide. as I made clear before our marriage. The Blackthorn name carries responsibilities that transcend personal indulgence. Love is not an indulgence, it is a necessity, Isabella countered, especially for children who have lost their mother. At the mention of their mother, something flashed in his eyes, that same pain she had glimpsed at their first meeting. You know nothing of what they lost, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Then tell me, she implored, softening her approach. Help me understand what happened to Catherine, to you. How can I properly care for your daughters if their past remains shrouded in mystery? He turned away abruptly. Catherine's death is not a subject for discussion. As for Miss Winters, she will remain in her position. However, he hesitated. You may continue your daily visits to the nursery. The children seem improved since your arrival. This grudging concession surprised Isabella. Thank you, Your Grace. He moved to leave, then paused at the door. Hughes informs me you reviewed the quarterly reports today. Isabella tensed, uncertain if this constituted another transgression in his eyes. Yes, I hope you don't object. He was impressed by your understanding of the figures, most unusual in a woman. Before she could determine if this was criticism or praise, he continued, The Sheffield mine situation requires attention. I shall review your notes on the matter. With that, he departed, leaving Isabella to wonder at this small crack in his glacial facade. The following Sunday afternoon, Isabella sat with the girls in the garden room, a pleasant space she had reclaimed from disuse. Charlotte was practicing her embroidery, while Emma drew pictures with coloured pencils, an activity Miss Winters considered frivolous, but which Isabella had quietly introduced. Look, Isabella. Emma held up her drawing. In the 6 weeks since Isabella's arrival, Emma had blossomed, her natural exuberance gradually emerging from beneath layers of rigid discipline. It's you and me and Charlotte and Mr. Whiskers in the garden. Isabella admired the childish rendering with genuine appreciation. It's wonderful, Emma. You've captured Charlotte's golden curls perfectly. Charlotte, still more reserved than her sister, but increasingly relaxed in Isabella's presence, glanced up from her needlework. Emma has quite forgotten Father's rule about using your title, Your Grace. When we are alone, I prefer Isabella, she reassured Charlotte. Though perhaps in public settings, Mother might be more appropriate than Your Grace, if you both feel comfortable with that. Emma's face lit up. Could I really call you Mother? Before Isabella could respond, a shadow fell across the doorway. The Duke stood there, his expression inscrutable as always, though something in his posture suggested he had overheard their exchange. The children immediately straightened, their momentary ease vanishing. Good afternoon, Father, they said in unison. Charlotte, Emma, he acknowledged with a nod. I came to inform you that I must travel to Scotland on business. I shall be absent for approximately 2 weeks. Isabella saw disappointment flicker across Emma's face. These brief Sunday interactions were the only regular contact the children had with their father. Perhaps, Isabella suggested carefully, the girls might write to you during your absence. They've both been practicing their penmanship diligently. The Duke seemed about to dismiss the suggestion when Charlotte spoke up tentatively. I could write about my progress with the pianoforte, Father. Miss Winters says I am advancing well. Something almost soft passed across his features. You play the pianoforte? Yes, Father, for nearly a year now. Isabella realized with a pang that he had not known this fundamental fact about his own daughter. Your mother was accomplished at the instrument, he said, the words appearing to surprise even himself. Emma, emboldened by this rare moment of personal conversation, held out her drawing. Would you like to see my picture, Father? For a suspended moment, Isabella feared he would refuse. Instead, he took the paper awkwardly, studying the childish figures. You have included the new roses in the south garden, he observed. They were your mother's favorite variety. Emma beamed at his recognition. Isabella promised we could cut some for the dinner table when they bloom properly. Did she? His gaze shifted to Isabella. Your mother would have approved. He handed the drawing back to Emma. You may write to me if you wish, once each week. My secretary will ensure I receive your letters. After he departed, Isabella noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. That brief exchange, with its rare mention of their mother and the Duke's unexpected acknowledgement of their activities, had affected both girls deeply. Later that evening, Isabella was surprised to receive a summons to the Duke's study. She found him surrounded by papers, preparing for his journey. "You requested to see me, Your Grace?" "Yes." He set aside his work. "During my absence, several matters will require attention. Hughes will manage most estate business, but there are certain social obligations that cannot be postponed." He slid a leather portfolio across the desk. "These contain the relevant correspondence and my instructions. Lady Harrington's charity committee meets Thursday next. The Blackthorns have always been represented. You will attend in my stead." Isabella accepted the portfolio, recognizing this delegation of duty as a sign of grudging trust. "Of course. There is also the matter of Charlotte's education," he continued. "She will soon require more advanced instruction than Miss Winters can provide. I have correspondence from several suitable finishing schools in the portfolio." "Finishing school?" Isabella questioned. "Charlotte is only 7. Planning must begin now for her placement next year. The best institutions have extensive waiting lists." Isabella hesitated, then ventured, "Have you considered a governess specifically trained in advanced subjects? Charlotte could remain at Blackthorn while receiving an education equal to any school." His eyebrows rose slightly at her counter-proposal. "You have given this some thought." "I have," Isabella admitted. "Charlotte is exceptionally bright, but still young. Separation from her sister and home might do more harm than good at this stage." The Duke studied her with new attention. "You've formed attachments to my daughters rather quickly." "They are remarkable children," Isabella said simply. "It would be impossible not to care for them." Something shifted in his expression, not warmth exactly, but a momentary lowering of his guard. "My mother was sent to boarding school at 8. She considered it formative to her character." "Times have changed," Isabella suggested gently. "Modern educational philosophies recognize the importance of family bonds alongside academic rigor. You speak as though you have studied such matters." "My own mother believed in education for women. She ensured I was taught by the finest tutors available, including subjects normally reserved for gentlemen." Isabella paused. "I would wish the same for Charlotte and Emma." The Duke tapped his fingers on the desk, considering. "Present me with alternatives when I return. I will consider your recommendations alongside the traditional options." As Isabella turned to leave, he added, "One more matter. During my absence, you have my authority to review and sign any urgent correspondence Hughes brings regarding the Sheffield mine situation. I've informed him of this arrangement." Surprised by this unprecedented delegation of business affairs, Isabella simply nodded. "I shall handle it with care." "I believe you will." For the briefest moment, something almost like respect showed in his eyes. "Good night, Isabella." It was the first time he had used her given name. The Duke's absence created space for subtle changes at Blackthorn Manor. Isabella established a new rhythm for the children's days, maintaining the structure they needed, while incorporating periods for play, music, and exploration of the estate grounds. Miss Winters remained rigid in her disapproval, but adapted to the adjusted schedule with grudging compliance. The charity committee meeting presented Isabella's first major social appearance as Duchess of Blackthorn. Lady Harrington and her circle initially received her with cool curiosity, clearly expecting little from the daughter of an impoverished earl who had married into one of England's oldest dukedoms. Isabella surprised them with her intelligence, poise, and thoughtful contributions to their planned hospital fundraising. By the meeting's end, several ladies had issued invitations for tea, and Lady Harrington herself remarked, "Blackthorn has chosen more wisely than we expected, my dear." "I believe it was necessity, rather than wisdom, that guided his choice," Isabella replied with disarming honesty. "But I intend to prove worthy of the position nonetheless." News of the Duchess's successful social debut travelled quickly. When a package arrived from London containing an exquisite paisley shawl with a brief note, "For the hospital fundraiser, Blackthorn," Isabella recognized it as her husband's acknowledgement of her efforts. At the end of the Duke's first week away, Hawkins brought Isabella an express letter bearing an unfamiliar seal. Inside was a report from the Sheffield mine manager, detailing deteriorating conditions and increasingly vocal worker protests. "His Grace should have been informed immediately," she told Hughes when he arrived in response to her summons. These safety concerns required immediate attention. Hughes shifted uncomfortably. The manager was instructed to report directly to His Grace, not to circumvent proper channels. "While men's lives hang in the balance," Isabella's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I'm going to Sheffield today." "Your Grace, that would be most irregular. A lady of your position visiting an industrial site." "A lady of my position has a responsibility to the people whose labor supports our privilege," Isabella countered. "Make the arrangements, Mr. Hughes, and send word ahead. I wish to see actual working conditions, not a sanitized presentation." 2 days later, Isabella returned to Blackthorn Manor, her elegant traveling clothes bearing traces of coal dust despite efforts to clean them. She immediately summoned Hughes and the estate solicitor to the library. "The conditions are unconscionable," she declared, spreading out notes and sketches she had made. "Inadequate supports, poor ventilation, children as young as 8, working 12-hour shifts in spaces barely large enough for their small bodies. Such practices are common throughout the industry," the solicitor pointed out. "That does not make them acceptable," Isabella replied firmly. "I've drafted orders for immediate improvements, with funds to be drawn from the estate's reserve. Mr. Hughes, you will oversee implementation personally." When the men hesitated, she added, "Would you prefer to explain to His Grace why we ignored clear evidence of impending disaster? The Eastern Tunnel could collapse within weeks." Reluctantly, they conceded to her authority. After they departed, Isabella sank into a chair, exhausted but satisfied. She had no illusion that her husband would approve of her actions, but she could not ignore such suffering when she had the power to address it. That evening, as she sat with Charlotte and Emma during their supper hour, she found herself the recipient of shy admiration. "Mrs. Pembroke in the kitchen says you went to help the mining families," Charlotte said carefully, watching Isabella's reaction. "She says you're a true lady, caring for those less fortunate." Isabella smiled, touched by this evidence that her actions were noticed even by the children. "Everyone deserves safety and dignity, Charlotte. Position brings responsibility along with privilege." "Would father have helped them too?" Emma asked innocently. Isabella considered her response carefully. "Your father has many responsibilities that demand his attention. Sometimes important matters can be overlooked when one person carries too heavy a burden alone." "Is that why you're here?" Charlotte asked perceptively. "To help carry father's burdens?" "In part," Isabella acknowledged, "and to help care for 2 very special young ladies." The Duke returned precisely when expected, arriving at Blackthorn Manor as dusk fell. Isabella was reading to the girls in the library when Hawkins announced his arrival. Both children immediately straightened, their relaxed demeanor shifting to formal attentiveness. "Good evening, father," they chorused as he entered. "Charlotte, Emma." He nodded to them, his gaze lingering a moment longer than usual. "I trust you have conducted yourselves properly during my absence." "Yes, father," Charlotte answered. "We wrote to you as permitted." "Indeed. Your penmanship shows improvement." This small praise brought a flush of pleasure to Charlotte's cheeks. Emma, less constrained by propriety, ventured, "Did you like my drawing of the castle in Scotland?" "It was imaginative," he replied, the faintest hint of softness in his tone. "Though I suspect the actual fortress has fewer turrets." Isabella marked their place in the book and rose. "The children have been exemplary. Perhaps they might tell you about their progress with the pianoforte before they retire for the evening." To her surprise, the Duke nodded. Briefly. As Charlotte tentatively demonstrated her newest piece, Isabella observed her husband. His posture remained formal, his expression controlled, yet something in his attention had shifted. He was truly seeing his daughter, perhaps for the first time in years. When the children had been escorted to the nursery, the Duke turned to Isabella. "I understand there has been activity regarding the Sheffield property." She met his gaze directly. "Yes, the situation required immediate intervention. I've taken the liberty of implementing safety improvements and adjusting working conditions." His expression hardened. "Without consulting me." There was no time for consultation. The Eastern Tunnel was at imminent risk of collapse. She handed him the portfolio containing her detailed observations and the actions taken. "I followed the authority you granted me in your absence." He leafed through the documents, his frown deepening. "These expenditures are significant." "Less costly than compensation to widows and orphans," she countered, "or the damage to the Blackthorn name should negligence be proven." For a tense moment she expected his anger. Instead, he closed the portfolio with deliberate care. "You've exceeded your instructions, but your assessment appears thorough. The changes will stand." Isabella barely contained her surprise at this concession. "Thank you. You visited the site personally," he noted, his tone impossible to interpret. "I did. How else could I properly evaluate the conditions?" The Duke studied her with that same unreadable expression. "Most women of your station would consider such a visit beneath their dignity." "Perhaps," Isabella replied, "but not beneath their humanity." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect. "You continue to confound expectations, Duchess. I shall take that as a compliment, Your Grace." The smallest hint of a smile touched his lips before vanishing. "See that you don't make a habit of managing my affairs without consultation." "Of course not," she agreed, "though I hope you might consider consulting me more regularly on matters where a different perspective could prove valuable." He regarded her for a long moment. "Perhaps. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have correspondence to attend to." As weeks passed, subtle changes continued at Blackthorn Manor. The Duke began joining them for tea in the afternoons when his schedule permitted. These occasions remained formal, his conversation primarily directed toward the children's education and activities. Yet Isabella noticed he listened more than before, occasionally asking questions that suggested genuine interest in their development. December brought preparations for Christmas, a season Isabella discovered had been observed with minimal festivity since Catherine's death. When she proposed more elaborate celebrations, she expected resistance. "The children deserve to experience the joy of the season," she ventured during one of their rare private dinners. "I thought perhaps a small tree in the drawing room, some simple decorations." The Duke set down his wineglass. Catherine was particularly fond of Christmas traditions. She insisted on greenery throughout the house and gifts for every servant. The unexpected mention of his late wife left Isabella momentarily speechless. "Then perhaps we might honor her memory by restoring some of those traditions." He studied the candle flame between them. "The first Christmas after her passing, I couldn't bear to continue the customs she had loved. It seemed a mockery of her absence." His voice had lost its usual cool precision, revealing a glimpse of the pain he typically concealed. "The children were too young to remember how it had been before." "But they're old enough now to create new memories," Isabella said gently. "Memories that include happiness alongside remembrance." His gaze met hers across the table, more open than she had ever seen it. "You may proceed with your plans, within reason." "Thank you." Isabella hesitated, then added, "Might I ask, what gifts did Catherine typically choose for the girls?" A shadow of pain crossed his face, but he answered, "Books for Charlotte. She recognized her scholarly nature even as an infant. For Emma," he paused, "musical toys." Catherine believed Emma would have her talent for music. Isabella absorbed this rare glimpse into the family's past. "She sounds like a remarkable woman who knew her daughters well." She was. For once he didn't retreat from the subject. Intelligent, compassionate, stubborn when she believed herself right. Not unlike... He stopped abruptly. "Not unlike," Isabella prompted softly. The Duke rose, his momentary openness vanishing. "It grows late. Good night, Isabella." Though he had withdrawn, Isabella recognized the significance of what had occurred. For the first time, he had voluntarily spoken of Catherine, sharing memories instead of burying them beneath silence. Christmas at Blackthorn Manor transformed the somber household. Under Isabella's direction, evergreen boughs adorned mantels and stairways, red ribbons brightened dark wood paneling, and the scent of spiced cider filled the air. The servants moved with new energy, many expressing quiet gratitude for the return of traditions long abandoned. On Christmas Eve, Isabella arranged a small gathering in the main drawing room. The children, dressed in their finest, gazed in wonder at the decorated tree. A tradition still novel in many English homes, but one Isabella's mother had embraced years earlier. "It's magical," Emma whispered, touching a glass ornament with reverent fingers. Even Miss Winters, still stiff but gradually less antagonistic toward Isabella's influence, admitted the decorations showed appropriate restraint while honoring the season. When the Duke entered, Isabella held her breath, uncertain how he would react to the physical transformation of spaces long kept unchanged. He paused in the doorway, his gaze sweeping over the festive scene, lingering on his daughters' excited faces. "You've been busy, Duchess," he observed, but without censure. "Do you approve, Father?" Charlotte asked, a rare hint of eagerness in her voice. Something in his expression softened as he looked at his eldest daughter. "It reminds me of Christmases past. Your mother would have found it suitable." From him this constituted high praise. Isabella exhaled slowly, relief mingling with a deeper satisfaction at having bridged another small gap between the Duke and his memories, and between father and daughters. Later, after the children had been escorted to bed with promises of presents in the morning, Isabella found herself alone with her husband in the drawing room, firelight casting warm shadows across the festive decorations. "I have something for you," the Duke said unexpectedly, retrieving a small package from his desk drawer. It seemed appropriate, given the season. Isabella accepted the carefully wrapped parcel with surprise. They had not discussed exchanging gifts between themselves. Opening it, she found a first edition of Wordsworth's poems, bound in fine leather. "This is beautiful," she said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "How did you know I admire Wordsworth's work? You quoted him during our discussion of Charlotte's education. The child is father of the man. I noticed your eyes when you spoke the words. They held genuine appreciation." Isabella was startled by this evidence that he had observed her so carefully, noticing details she herself had forgotten. "You have a perceptive eye, Your Grace." "Adrian," he said quietly. "Pardon? My name is Adrian. It seems absurd that my wife continues to address me by title in private." The simple invitation felt momentous, another small barrier lowered between them. "Thank you, Adrian. I have something for you as well." She retrieved a package from beside her chair, watching nervously as he unwrapped it. Inside lay a finely crafted wooden box, its lid inlaid with the blackthorn crest. "Open it," she encouraged. Inside, he found a collection of small watercolor paintings. The children in the garden, Charlotte at the pianoforte, Emma feeding birds in the park, both girls beside the Christmas tree. "I've been practicing my watercolors," Isabella explained, suddenly shy. "I thought you might like to have these moments, especially when your duties take you from home." Adrian stared at the paintings, his expression unreadable. For a terrible moment, Isabella feared she had presumed too much, crossed an invisible line into matters too personal. "Catherine used to sketch them," he said finally, his voice low. "I have a collection of her drawings from their infancy. I haven't looked at them since you lost her," Isabella finished gently. "I didn't know. I didn't intend to cause pain with my gift." "No." He closed the box carefully. "It isn't pain, precisely. Or not only pain." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Thank you, Isabella. It is thoughtful." In the silence that followed, something shifted between them. Not dramatic, but perceptible. A small current of understanding that had not existed before. "Would you tell me about her?" Isabella asked softly. "Not now, perhaps, but someday. The girls have so few memories, and I think remembering might hurt less than trying to forget." Adrian's gaze returned to the fire. For so long he had built walls around Catherine's memory, as if speaking of her might shatter the fragile control he maintained, but Isabella's gentle persistence had begun to create cracks in those defenses. "Perhaps," he conceded, his voice barely audible, "someday." As Isabella prepared for bed that night, she reflected on the months since her arrival at Blackthorn Manor. The household remained far from the warm family home she had secretly hoped to create, but change was happening, slowly, almost imperceptibly at times, but undeniably real. The Duke, Adrian, remained a complex, guarded man, but she had glimpsed enough of the person beneath the formal exterior to understand that his coldness masked profound pain rather than cruelty. The girls were blossoming under her care, finding balance between proper behavior and childhood joy. And Isabella herself had found unexpected purpose in her arranged marriage, not merely in fulfilling social obligations, but in healing a fractured family. Whatever the future might hold, she had already accomplished more than she had dared hope on that rainy day when her father had announced her betrothal. As she drifted towards sleep, Isabella recalled Emma's words earlier that evening. "This is the best Christmas ever." For a child who had known only somber observances of the holiday, perhaps it was. And perhaps, Isabella thought with cautious hope, it marked the beginning of better days for all at Blackthorn Manor. Spring arrived at Blackthorn Manor, breathing new life into gardens long neglected. Under Isabella's direction, Catherine's beloved rose garden had been restored, and now crimson and ivory blooms climbed trellises where only thorns had remained. Nearly 6 months had passed since her wedding day, 6 months of gradual, often painful progress in thawing the frost that had encased the Blackthorne family. The Duke, Adrian as she now thought of him, though she rarely used his name aloud, maintained his reserve, but moments of connection had grown more frequent, especially regarding the children. Emma now ran to Isabella without hesitation, offering uninhibited affection that warmed her heart. Charlotte, still more cautious by nature, had nonetheless developed a quiet confidence in Isabella's presence, sharing her thoughts and concerns with increasing openness. Even Miss Winters had grudgingly adapted to Isabella's influence, though she maintained her belief in strict discipline. The household staff had transformed from silent, efficient shadows to individuals who occasionally smiled and spoke freely in the Duchess's presence. On a particularly fine April morning, Isabella sat at her desk reviewing correspondence when Hawkins appeared at her door, his dignified demeanor disturbed by unusual agitation. "Your Grace, a gentleman has arrived requesting an immediate audience with His Grace. The Duke is meeting with his solicitor in London today," Isabella reminded him. "He isn't expected until evening." "Yes, Your Grace. I informed the gentleman, but he insists his business cannot wait." Hawkins hesitated. "He claims to be Mr. James Harlow, brother to the late Duchess." Isabella set down her pen. Catherine's family had never visited Blackthorne Manor during Isabella's residence, nor had Adrian ever mentioned them. "Did the Duke leave instructions regarding Mr. Harlow?" "No, Your Grace. To my knowledge, Mr. Harlow has not called at Blackthorne Manor in nearly 4 years." "I see." Isabella considered the implications. "Please show Mr. Harlow to the blue drawing room. Offer refreshments and inform him I shall join him shortly." After Hawkins departed, Isabella took a moment to compose herself. This unexpected visitor likely represented another piece of the puzzle that was Adrian's past, and potentially another source of pain. In the drawing room, she found a man in his early 30s with fair hair and Catherine's delicate features. He paced near the window, tension evident in his posture. "Mr. Harlow," Isabella greeted him. "I am Isabella Blackthorne, Duchess of Blackthorne." He turned, surprise flickering across his face before he bowed correctly. "Your Grace, I apologize for the intrusion. I was unaware the Duke had remarried." "Last autumn," she confirmed, gesturing for him to be seated. "My husband is in London on business today. How may I assist you?" Harlow remained standing, his expression troubled. "I must speak with Blackthorne directly. It concerns a matter of family importance." "I understand. However, as he will not return until evening, perhaps you might share the nature of your business with me. As his wife, I may be able to help." Harlow studied her with undisguised assessment. "With respect, Your Grace, you cannot possibly understand the history involved. This matter dates back to my sister's death." Isabella maintained her composure despite his dismissal. "Mr. Harlow, I am well aware that your sister's passing left profound wounds. While I cannot claim to know all that transpired, I have come to care deeply for the family she left behind, including her daughters." At the mention of the children, his expression changed. "Charlotte and Emma, how are they? I haven't seen them since Catherine's funeral. Blackthorne cut all ties with our family after—" "After what, Mr. Harlow?" Isabella prompted gently when he hesitated. He sank into a chair, the fight seeming to leave him. "After I accused him of being responsible for her death." Isabella controlled her shock. "Perhaps you should explain." "Catherine was always vibrant, full of life," Harlow began, pain evident in his voice. "When she married Blackthorne, they seemed genuinely happy. But after Emma's birth, something changed. Catherine became withdrawn, frightened. In her letters, she hinted at dark moods, at Blackthorne's increasingly controlling behavior." He leaned forward intently. "The official account claims she died of a fever, but I never believed it. Her last letter to me expressed fear, not of illness, but of her husband. She wrote she had discovered something that changed everything, that she needed to speak with me urgently. But she fell ill before that could happen," Isabella surmised. "Conveniently so," Harlow's tone was bitter. "Blackthorne claimed she collapsed suddenly, that the doctor was summoned too late. He refused to allow our family to see her before burial." Isabella processed this disturbing account. What brings you to Blackthorn Manor now, after 4 years? Harlow reached into his coat, withdrawing a folded paper. This arrived yesterday from a former lady's maid who served Catherine. The woman is dying and claims her conscience won't allow her to take certain knowledge to the grave. He handed the letter to Isabella. She writes that Catherine confided in her about a hidden diary, concealed somewhere in Blackthorn Manor. Catherine apparently recorded her fears and suspicions there, including what she discovered about her husband. Isabella read the maid's trembling script with growing unease. The letter contained no specifics about what Catherine had allegedly discovered, only the maid's conviction that the diary would reveal the truth about her Grace's final days. "You believe this diary exists and contains evidence against my husband," Isabella stated, keeping her voice neutral. "I believe my sister deserves justice," Harlow replied. "For 4 years, I've lived with the conviction that Blackthorn was somehow responsible for her death, yet without proof I could do nothing." Isabella carefully folded the letter, gathering her thoughts. "Mr. Harlow, these are serious implications against a man who, in my experience, deeply mourns your sister still." "Does he?" Harlow asked skeptically. "The man I knew was consumed by ambition and control. Catherine's letters described how he changed after they married, becoming distant, cold, obsessed with his business affairs and political connections. The description matched the Adrian that Isabella had first encountered, yet contradicted the glimpses she had seen of the man beneath that frozen exterior. "What do you intend to do with this diary, should it exist?" she asked. "That depends on its contents," Harlow admitted. "If it confirms my suspicions, I would seek justice through legal means. If I was wrong—" He hesitated. "Then perhaps I might finally find peace with my sister's passing." Isabella made her decision. "Mr. Harlow, I cannot permit you to search Blackthorn Manor in my husband's absence. However, I am not unsympathetic to your need for closure." She rose, her mind working rapidly. "I propose this. Remain as our guest until my husband returns. I will speak with him about the matter privately first, which may prepare him to receive you more favorably." Harlow looked skeptical. "Blackthorn will never willingly discuss Catherine with me, let alone acknowledge this diary." "Perhaps not," Isabella conceded, "but he might with me." She did not add that she too now felt compelled to discover the truth, not only for Harlow's sake, but for her own and for the children's future. After arranging for Harlow's accommodation in a guest wing far from the family apartments, Isabella retreated to the library, her mind troubled. The accusations against Adrian seemed incompatible with the man she had come to know, yet she could not dismiss them entirely. His refusal to discuss Catherine's death had always struck her as excessive, even for a grieving widower. Could there be truth to Harlow's suspicions? The possibility chilled her. Yet Isabella's instincts, which rarely misled her, suggested something more complex than the simple narrative of villainous husband and victimized wife. When Adrian returned that evening, Isabella knew immediately that he had already been informed of their visitor. His expression was thunderous as he strode into the private sitting room where she waited. "You had no right to receive that man in my home," he said without preamble, anger making his voice dangerously quiet. Isabella met his gaze steadily. "He is your late wife's brother, and he traveled a considerable distance. Common courtesy demanded I receive him." "Courtesy?" Adrian laughed bitterly. "James Harlow publicly accused me of causing Catherine's death. He threatened legal action, demanded an inquiry, and poisoned what remained of her family against me." "Why have you never spoken of this?" Isabella asked. "It was not your concern." He paced before the fireplace, tension radiating from his tall frame. "Harlow will leave Blackthorn Manor immediately. I will not have him under my roof." "He brought a letter, Adrian." Isabella rose, moving to her desk to retrieve the maid's correspondence. "You should read it before you dismiss him." Adrian stared at the offered paper without taking it. "More accusations? More slander against my name?" "Information about a diary Catherine supposedly kept. A diary that might contain important truths about her final days." His expression hardened further. "Catherine kept no diary." "Can you be certain?" "The maid claims it was hidden, that Catherine feared your discovering it." "So now you too believe I had reason to harm my wife?" The pain beneath his anger was suddenly visible, raw and devastating. "Has your opinion of me fallen so low?" Isabella stepped closer, her voice softening. "I believe you loved Catherine, and still mourn her deeply. But I also believe there are aspects of her death you have never shared, perhaps cannot bear to share. This diary, if it exists, might bring closure not just to her brother, but to you as well." Adrian turned away, bracing one arm against the mantelpiece. For several long moments he remained silent, the struggle within him almost palpable. "There was no diary," he said finally, his voice altered, stripped of its usual control. "But Catherine did leave a letter I found only after her death, hidden among her personal correspondence." Isabella waited, sensing they had reached a crucial threshold. She wrote of her unhappiness, her conviction that I had changed, grown cold toward her. She spoke of suspicions. He faltered. "Suspicions that I had betrayed her, that my frequent absences concealed an affair." "And had you?" Isabella asked gently. "Never." The word emerged with fierce conviction. "I loved Catherine completely. My absences were necessitated by the reforms I was quietly supporting in Parliament, reforms that required delicate political maneuvering, often behind closed doors. You didn't tell her about your political work?" "I was sworn to secrecy until the bill could be introduced properly. Several powerful families stood to lose significant income if child labor reforms passed. I couldn't risk word spreading, not even to Catherine." "So she believed you distant and secretive," Isabella realized. "Perhaps involved with another woman when in fact you were working for a cause she would have championed herself." Adrian nodded, the gesture heavy with regret. The final irony was that I had decided to confide in her that very week, to share everything once the initial parliamentary procedures were complete. But then the fever struck, so suddenly, so violently. His voice broke. By the time I returned from London, she was beyond coherent speech. She died believing the worst of me. Isabella moved to his side, gently touching his arm. "Did you never try to explain this to her brother, to her family?" "I showed Harlow the letter," Adrian said, bitterness returning to his tone. "He claimed I had forged it to cover my guilt. In his grief, he was determined to blame someone for the senselessness of her death. I became that target." "And you retreated behind walls of silence and duty," Isabella concluded softly, "cutting yourself off from everyone, including your daughters, rather than risk such pain again." He did not deny it, his silence confirmation enough. "Adrian," she ventured carefully, "would you consider speaking with James now? Sharing this truth after all these years? He has lived with his own pain and guilt, believing he failed to protect his sister." "To what end?" Adrian asked wearily. "He chose his narrative years ago. No explanation will satisfy him now." "Perhaps not," Isabella acknowledged. "But you have daughters who deserve to know their mother was loved truly and well by their father. And you—" She hesitated, then continued with gentle firmness, "You deserve to forgive yourself for circumstances beyond your control." Adrian's gaze met hers, the grey eyes that had once seemed so cold, now revealing depths of suppressed emotion. "How you believe I should revisit this pain? Open these wounds again?" "I believe," Isabella said carefully, "that wounds left to fester in darkness never truly heal. Perhaps bringing truth to light is the only path to genuine peace for all who loved Catherine." The following morning, Isabella arranged for the children to visit a neighboring estate where a spring fair was being held, ensuring they would be absent during the difficult conversation to come. In the formal study, Adrian sat behind his desk, his posture rigid as Hawkins showed James Harlow in. The two men regarded each other with wary hostility, years of blame and bitterness standing between them like a physical barrier. "Blackthorn." Harlow's greeting was cold. "Harlow." Adrian's response equally so. Isabella moved to stand beside her husband's chair, her presence a silent support. "Gentlemen, I suggested this meeting in hopes that honest dialogue might begin to heal old wounds. Mr. Harlow, my husband has agreed to address your concerns directly." Adrian's expression remained impassive, but Isabella noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for a drawer in his desk. From it, he withdrew a small leather case, opening it to remove a folded letter yellowed with age. "4 years ago I showed you this letter," Adrian began, his voice controlled. "You dismissed it as a fabrication. I ask you now to read it again, not with the immediate rage of grief, but with the perspective time provides." Harlow hesitated, then accepted the letter. As he read Catherine's handwritten words, his expression shifted from skepticism to confusion. "If this is genuine," he began. It is, Adrian interrupted. Compare it to her other correspondence if you doubt. Then why would Catherine believe you unfaithful? She was not a fanciful woman given to baseless jealousy. Adrian exhaled slowly. During the months before her death, I was engaged in confidential work supporting the Factory Act amendments. Reform that would limit child labor in mines and factories required discretion, as several influential families opposed any such restrictions. Understanding dawned in Harlow's eyes. The Carmichael Bill. You were involved with that legislation. I provided critical support and evidence gathered from my own industrial holdings. The work necessitated many evenings away, meetings that could not be disclosed without endangering the bill's passage. Why didn't you tell Catherine? I was bound by promises of absolute secrecy until the initial reading. The opposition would have used any leak to undermine our position. Adrian's voice roughened. I intended to explain everything to her that final week, but the fever took hold so rapidly. Harlow sat back, visibly processing this information. If what you say is true, then for 4 years I've blamed you unjustly. And for 4 years, I have lived with the knowledge that my wife died believing I had betrayed her trust, Adrian responded, unexpected emotion breaking through his control. Which of us has carried the heavier burden, Harlow? Isabella placed a gentle hand on Adrian's shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. Perhaps you both honored Catherine's memory in your own ways. Mr. Harlow by seeking justice for her, and my husband by protecting their daughters and continuing the charitable work she valued. Harlow studied the letter again. She writes here of evidence, of proof she had discovered. What was she referring to? Adrian frowned. I never knew. The fever came so suddenly after she wrote this. By the time I returned from London, she was delirious, calling for her mother, for the children. His voice faltered. The doctor said the infection had reached her brain. The maid's letter mentions a hidden diary, Harlow persisted. Could that have contained what she believed was evidence? Catherine kept no diary that I ever saw, Adrian maintained. After her death, I preserved her rooms exactly as she left them for nearly a year before I could bear to have her personal items sorted. No diary was found. An idea formed in Isabella's mind. Perhaps it wasn't kept in her obvious personal spaces. If Catherine believed she needed to hide her thoughts, she turned to Harlow. Did your sister have a special place, a retreat within the house? Harlow considered this. She wrote often of the small conservatory adjoining her sitting room. She said it was where she felt most at peace, surrounded by her plants and drawings. Adrian nodded slowly. She spent hours there, especially after Emma's birth. It was her private sanctuary. Could we examine it? Isabella suggested. If Catherine hid something, that might be where she would choose. The conservatory had been maintained like the rest of the house, clean and functional, but without the loving attention that had once made it Catherine's haven. Potted plants still occupied the shelves and stands, though they were more ordered, less exuberant than they might once have been. Nothing here has been significantly altered, Adrian explained, his voice oddly subdued in this space so intimately connected to his first wife. The basic furnishings remain as Catherine arranged them. Isabella moved carefully through the small glass-enclosed room, trying to see it through Catherine's eyes. Where would a woman hide her most private thoughts in a space that was otherwise open to household staff? Her attention was drawn to a delicate writing desk positioned to catch the morning light. Did Catherine use this desk regularly? Daily, Adrian confirmed. She wrote her correspondence here, made sketches of the gardens, planned her household improvements. Isabella examined the desk carefully. It was a beautiful piece, inlaid with mother-of-pearl in a floral pattern. Such desks often have hidden compartments, she mused, running her fingers along the edges. My father had one with a drawer that could only be accessed by pressing a specific section of the inlay. Adrian stepped closer, his expression conflicted. Catherine treasured this desk. It was a wedding gift from her grandmother. Isabella studied the intricate pattern, noticing that one flower, a lily, stood out from the others, its petals slightly more raised. On impulse, she pressed it gently. A soft click sounded, and a narrow panel on the desk's side slid open, revealing a small hidden compartment. There is something, Isabella said softly, reaching into the space. She withdrew a small leather-bound book, its pages well filled with Catherine's distinctive handwriting. The three stood in silence, staring at the diary that had remained hidden for more than 4 years. I should read it first, Adrian said finally, his voice strained. If it contains what Harlow suggests. No, Isabella countered gently. We should read it together, both of you who loved her, with me as witness. Whatever truths it contains affect all of us now. They moved to Catherine's sitting room, the tension palpable as Isabella carefully opened the diary. The early entries confirmed what they already knew: Catherine's growing concern over Adrian's absences, her fear that he had become distant, her confusion about the change in their once warm relationship. Then came an entry dated 3 days before her final illness began. I can no longer deny the evidence before me. A returns from his meetings with a peculiar scent upon his clothes, not a woman's perfume as I had feared, but something medicinal. Today I found a letter in his coat pocket from Dr. Wells regarding treatments and cautions. My husband is ill, perhaps gravely so, and concealing it from me. This explains his pallor, his exhaustion, his reluctance to share my bed. Why would he hide such a matter unless the diagnosis is dire? I am frantic with worry, yet must pretend ignorance. Tomorrow I shall visit Dr. Wells myself and demand the truth. Isabella looked up from the page to find Adrian's face drained of color. Dr. Wells, he said hoarsely, the physician consulting on the child labor reform. He was documenting the effects of mine conditions on workers' health, including me, as I had spent days in the mines gathering first-hand evidence. Harlow leaned forward. You were investigating conditions personally? Adrian nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. The coal dust and poor air quality affected my breathing. Wells prescribed treatments and warned about prolonged exposure. Catherine found his letter and misunderstood completely. Isabella continued reading the final entry, dated the day before Catherine fell ill. Dr. Wells confirmed my worst fears. A. has been exposing himself to dangerous conditions in coal mines and factories, documenting the effects on workers and children for some parliamentary cause he values above his own health, above his family's welfare. The doctor says prolonged exposure could permanently damage his lungs, yet A continues this reckless crusade in secret. I am beside myself with anger and fear. How dare he risk orphaning our daughters for political ambition? I have written to James, asking him to come. A. must be made to see reason before it is too late. The diary ended there. Isabella closed it gently, the silence in the room heavy with realization. She thought I was killing myself for politics, Adrian whispered, shock evident in his voice. She died believing I valued reform above her and our daughters. No, Isabella corrected softly. She died fearing for you, angry because she loved you too much to accept your risking your life, even for a worthy cause. Harlow's expression had transformed as understanding replaced suspicion. This was the evidence she mentioned, proof not of infidelity or cruelty, but of self-sacrifice taken too far. He looked at Adrian with new eyes. She was frightened for you, not of you. Adrian stood abruptly, moving to the window. His rigid posture betrayed the storm of emotion he fought to control. All these years, he said, his voice barely audible. All these years of believing she died thinking the worst of me, when in fact she died loving you so deeply that the thought of losing you was unbearable. Isabella finished for him. Harlow rose, his own composure fragile. I owe you an apology, Blackthorne. I was wrong, grievously wrong, to accuse you as I did. We both failed her, Adrian replied, turning back to face him. I through misguided secrecy, you through misguided suspicion, and my daughters have paid the price for our mutual blindness. Perhaps, Isabella suggested gently, it is not too late to begin healing those wounds. Later that evening, after Harlow had departed with a promise to return soon with Catherine's parents for a proper reconciliation, Isabella found Adrian in his study. He sat before the fire, Catherine's diary open in his lap, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. The children are asking for you, she said softly. They wish to tell you about their day at the fair. He looked up momentarily disoriented, as if returning from a great distance. Yes, of course, I should see them. Isabella moved to his side. Before you do, may I ask what you are thinking? I am thinking, he said slowly, of all the years wasted in bitterness and self-recrimination, years when I withdrew from my daughters because seeing Catherine in their faces caused too much pain. You protected them as best you knew how, Isabella offered. No. His denial was firm but without anger. I failed them, just as I failed Catherine by not trusting her with the truth of my work. He closed the diary carefully. I told myself I was honoring her memory by maintaining the strict routines she established, but in reality I was hiding from the joy she would have wanted for her children. Isabella knelt beside his chair, taking his hand in hers. Adrian, you cannot change the past, but the future remains unwritten. Your daughters need their father, not a distant guardian, but the man Catherine loved, the man who was willing to risk his health to protect children he'd never met. He turned to her, his grey eyes searching her face as if seeing her truly for the first time. How did you come to understand me so well, Isabella? How did you see past the walls I built? Perhaps because I was looking for the man rather than the Duke, she answered simply. From our first meeting, I sensed your coldness masked something deeper. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Even when I told you my heart had died with Catherine. Especially then, Isabella replied. A truly heartless man would never have declared himself so definitively ruined by loss. Adrian's hand tightened around hers. I meant those words on our wedding day. I believed my capacity for feeling had been buried with her. He paused, something new entering his expression. I was wrong. Isabella's breath caught at the implication in his voice, in his eyes. Adrian, you have brought life back to this house, he continued, his voice gaining strength. To my children, and, against all expectation, to me. His free hand rose to touch her cheek with unexpected gentleness. I made you no promises beyond the legal bonds of marriage, offered you nothing but duty in return for your sacrifice. You deserved better. I made my choice knowingly, Isabella reminded him, though her heart raced at his touch. Did you? An arranged marriage to a man widely known as cold and forbidding with 2 motherless children and a household shrouded in grief? What kind of choice was that? The kind that led me to you, she answered simply, to Charlotte and Emma, to a purpose greater than I could have found elsewhere. Adrian studied her with wonder. Catherine would have liked you, he said unexpectedly. She valued honesty and courage above all virtues. You have both in abundance. I would have liked her too, I think, Isabella replied. From all you've shared from her writing, she seems to have been remarkable. She was. His acknowledgement held affection without the shattering pain that had previously accompanied any mention of Catherine. And so are you, though in different ways. His voice softened. I have not been a proper husband to you, Isabella. She flushed slightly at his directness. You have been exactly the husband you promised to be. A poor promise, then. His hand moved from her cheek to gently lift her chin, ensuring she met his gaze. I find myself wanting to offer a new one. Isabella's heart quickened. What sort of promise? To try, he said simply. To be not just a husband in name and legal standing, but a true partner. To open myself to the possibility that my heart, while scarred, is not beyond redemption. His voice grew husky. To see if what I have begun to feel for you might grow into something worthy of the extraordinary woman you are. Tears pricked at Isabella's eyes, unexpected emotion rising in her throat. For months, she had told herself that respect and cordial cooperation were all she could hope for in this marriage. To hear him speak of deeper possibilities overwhelmed her. I would welcome such a promise, she managed to say, and offer one in return, to honor Catherine's memory while helping to build a new future, to continue loving your daughters as if they were my own, and to be patient as you find your way back to yourself. Adrian rose, drawing her to her feet before him. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if memorizing her features. Then, with exquisite gentleness, he lowered his lips to hers. Unlike the brief formal kiss at their wedding, this was a true meeting, tentative at first, then warming as Isabella responded. When they parted, something had fundamentally changed between them. The Duke, who had once declared his heart dead, had found it beating anew. I believe, he said softly, the children are waiting to tell us about their adventures at the fair. Isabella smiled, joy bubbling through her veins. Yes, and I suspect Emma has persuaded someone to purchase entirely too many sweets. Adrian offered his arm with a warmth that transformed his handsome features. Then we should go to them together. As they walked toward the nursery, Isabella reflected on the extraordinary journey from their cold wedding day to this moment of genuine connection. The path ahead would not be simple. Adrian's grief for Catherine would always be part of him, and building true intimacy would require patience and courage from them both. But as Charlotte's face lit with surprise at seeing her father and stepmother enter hand in hand, and as Emma rushed to embrace them both without hesitation, Isabella knew with certainty that the shadows of Blackthorn Manor were finally receding. 3 weeks later, on a perfect May afternoon, Isabella sat on a blanket spread beneath an ancient oak tree on the estate grounds. Emma lay beside her, flower crowns of their making adorning both their heads. Charlotte sat nearby, reading aloud from a book of poetry, her natural reserve giving way to animated expression as she shared verses she loved. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Adrian rode toward them, having returned from visiting tenants on the far side of the estate. He dismounted gracefully, handing the reins to a waiting groom. "Father," Emma called, jumping up to run to him. "Isabella taught us to make flower crowns like queens wear." To Isabella's delight, Adrian knelt to receive his younger daughter's enthusiastic embrace without reservation. "Did she indeed? It becomes you, Your Majesty." He bowed playfully, drawing giggles from Emma. Charlotte approached more sedately but with equal warmth. "We've been reading Wordsworth, Father. Isabella says you used to read poetry aloud in the evenings." "Many years ago," Adrian acknowledged, his eyes meeting Isabella's over their daughter's head. "Perhaps it's time to revive the tradition." He joined them on the blanket, his formal riding clothes incongruous against the informal setting, yet his ease with his family transforming him from the austere duke to simply a man enjoying a spring day with those he loved. As Charlotte resumed reading, Adrian's hand found Isabella's, their fingers intertwining naturally. The simple touch conveyed more than grand declarations could: a promise kept, a future embraced, a heart once thought dead, now vibrantly alive. The afternoon sun cast golden light across Blackthorn Manor in the distance, its ancient stones no longer seeming forbidding but protective, sheltering the family that had found its way back to joy within its walls. Isabella gazed at the faces around her, Charlotte's growing confidence, Emma's uninhibited happiness, and Adrian's transformed countenance. The whispered words at the altar that had once chilled her heart, "My heart died with the mother of my daughters," had proven false, not through deception, but through healing. In their place, a new truth had emerged. Love, once known, could be found again, different perhaps, shaped by experience and loss, but no less profound for the journey taken to reach it. As Adrian's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, Isabella felt a sense of completion that transcended the practical arrangements that had brought her to Blackthorn Manor. What had begun as duty had blossomed into something far richer. A love built on understanding, respect, and the courage to embrace life after loss. The Duke had kissed her at the altar with cold formality and whispered words of finality and grief. But here, beneath the spreading oak with their family surrounding them, his eyes promised a future neither of them could have imagined on that grey London day. A future built not on forgetting the past, but on honouring it, while daring to write a new chapter together. The end. Dear listener, as the sun sets on Isabella and Adrian's story, perhaps you find a familiar echo in your own heart. The walls we build after profound loss, not unlike those of Blackthorn Manor, may seem to protect us but often only imprison our ability to feel again. Life rarely follows the paths we plan. Like Isabella, many of us face circumstances we didn't choose, discovering strength we didn't know we possessed. The winter of grief, no matter how long or bitter, eventually yields to spring's gentle persistence. In your own journey through the seasons of life, remember that healing doesn't dishonor what was lost. Adrian feared that loving again would betray Catherine's memory, when in truth, his capacity to love again honored the gift she had first awakened in him. Perhaps you too have known closed doors, silent rooms where memories echo, or gardens where once vibrant flowers gave way to thorns. Know that it is never too late to tend those gardens again, to allow light back into shadowed corners of your heart. Your story, like all the best ones, is still being written. Whatever chapter you find yourself in tonight, whether one of challenge or triumph, may you rest peacefully knowing that even the most tightly sealed hearts can open again to joy. The courage to begin anew, to reach for connection despite past wounds, remains one of life's most profound acts of faith. Like Isabella extending her hand to two frightened children, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply to offer tenderness in a world that has known too much coldness. As you close your eyes tonight, may you feel embraced by the same protective warmth that finally filled Blackthorn Manor. May your dreams be gentle, your rest deep, and may you awaken ready to discover what new gifts tomorrow holds. For in the end, it is never too late to find that our capacity for love and healing runs deeper than our wounds. The heart, once thought beyond redemption, proves itself remarkably resilient when given the chance to beat anew. Legends of the Fall. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this emotional journey. We hope Isabella and Adrian's story reminded you that even the coldest hearts can beat again, and that love can grow in the unlikeliest places. If this story moved you, please consider supporting our channel. Like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, share this story with someone who loves historical romance, and subscribe so we can continue telling stories filled with love, redemption, and emotional twists. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another story from our channel. Click and be surprised by another heart-stirring tale like this one.